Welcome back to a new, very special Sunday YouTube live class. Today, the topic is gender neutral, inclusive, and non binary French. So, welcome. If you're listening right now, please say hi in the chat. I see we already have Connie and Linda here in the chat who are fidèle au poste. That should actually be a expression of the week. Fidèle au poste, so literally faithful to the position. So, you're just really being here and Keith still being here. If you're wondering what is going on with the weird decor today, I've had to improvise all week because I have a fire alarm that is apparently out of a battery, or I don't know what's going on, just started beeping sharply every minute yesterday morning on Saturday. And of course, I haven't been able to contact anyone because it's a weekend here. So I've been improvising with my surroundings just to try to avoid being in the room where I normally work because beeps, it's horrible, and it just drives me crazy. So I thought that it would be less bad to just be sitting on my bed and working here than having to bear with that. So please bear with the surroundings. I have stuffies, which is nice. I also have IKEA, for those of you who know IKEA from some thumbnails. So yeah, we're just rolling with it. It's a bit of improvisation. As usual, the worksheet is available on my Telegram channel still now if you haven't gotten it from your email. So it's in the link is in the description below. I can tell you that I still have a couple of spots available to work with me one-on-one. So if you are needing to improve your French and you have specific reasons for that, like your work or maybe needing to have a citizenship or something, please feel free to contact me. You have the link for that in the description, I believe, or you can just always email me or contact me in any way. I'll just, if you write a comment, for example, I'll find your comment. I send you the right link. Yeah, without further ado, let's get into the gender neutral, inclusive, and non-binary French. It's a topic that has taken me quite a bit of research, and not because I didn't know about it, but mostly because I wanted to find out exactly what's what about the newish écriture inclusive and what happened with it, because it was very controversial. A lot of people were really upset about it, and so I did quite a bit of digging this week to understand, what happened with it. It also made me pretty mad, to be honest. I'll tell you why later, but yeah, I didn't love it. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the best research to be doing for me and my mental health. A lot of it feels pretty absurd, but yeah, we'll sort that out. So first, so I've divided this class into 3 parts. As usual, we'll have also the idiom of the week and the French summary afterwards. But the first part is about gender neutrality with standard French, which is something that has always existed, that we've always been able to do. And it is what I myself was using when I was wanting to write in neutral French in my past day job, where I was working I was working for a period tracking app, and they had the goal of writing their text gender neutral. And so what I was using was standard French things. We didn't have any sort of écriture inclusive at the time. Actually, it was just the beginning of it starting. So I used a little bit of it, but I tried to stick really to like what is being used in gender in standard French. And as you will see, we can actually use standard French and still be quote unquote neutral. It's tricky, it takes a lot of effort, but it can be done. So I'll start by explaining how it can be done in this way, and then we'll look at non-binary neopronouns and grammar, because it does exist. I did a bit of digging around that, and I can explain to you what exists right now and how you can use those if you want to. Although it's easier to use them to speak to someone else than to have other people use your pronouns, because it's really, really tricky in French, a lot more than it is in English, to get other people to do that, because it is, in English, there's this question that whether or not singular they is grammatically correct, but the fact of the matter is that it actually is grammatically correct, and it has been a part of the English language for since the 16th century, but in French it's just not. It's just something brand new. That's why we call them neopronouns. So we'll dig a bit more into that. And finally, last third of this session will be about écriture inclusive and what are the new things that have come out, and are they useful? Can you use them? How do you deal with them? And I've added a lot of links on the worksheet. So the worksheet is really helpful. You'll be able to visit, for example, those images. They're really tiny on the worksheet, but you can visit the website and you can see the bigger versions, which I actually have printed so I can look into them in more details. But first, really, really important, and really, how do you achieve gender neutrality with standard French, knowing that you will always have every noun being masculine or feminine? And if you don't know what that is about, I really strongly recommend the YouTube live that I have been sharing. I think it was last month, sometime in August, I believe, or maybe end of January, where I explained everything you have to know about gender in French, so grammatical gender, masculine and feminine, because what we are doing now just builds on top of that. So if you're not clear about it, I recommend watching it next. But really, the answer is actually in the question. The thing that you really need to understand is that the gender in French is attached to the word, not to the object. So if I say la bouteille, the feminine gender is not, like, this bottle is not masculine or feminine, not in English, not in French, not in any language. The object itself does not have a gender, but the word la bouteille is feminine because every noun in French has a gender, masculine or feminine. And that is really the key here, because once you understand that the gender corresponds to the word, not to the person that you're referring to or the object, then that's something you can use in order to speak without disclosing or without associating a gender to a person. So for example, I have given you a couple of phrasings here as just examples. So the so-called formulation épicène. Épicène just basically means non-gendered. So if you say une personne, okay, so like a person, person is always feminine, regardless of the gender of the actual person, because remember, the masculine or feminine pertains to the word, not to the object in real life. So if I say je connais une personne très intelligente, you cannot know anything about the gender of that person. Now, people might go out and assume that this person is feminine just because I have said une personne and I have not said un homme. But the fact of the matter is you cannot know. And that is really useful. You can use it for men, for women, and for non-binary people indifferently. Everybody will be une personne, and all the adjectives associated to une personne will be in the feminine. So une personne très intelligente, not très intelligent. If you would prefer to use a masculine word, why not? You can use un individu. So, je connais un individu très intelligent. If you say un individu in French, just like when you say an individual in English, you cannot know this person's gender. It could be male, could be female, could be non-binary. And so these are the kind of things that you can use. Even better, you can use quelqu'un, which is always neutral, therefore quote-unquote masculine by default, because the neutral has disappeared in France. So you can say je connais quelqu'un d'intelligent, and you cannot know if this person, this someone, if I say I know someone intelligent, also in English, you cannot know if it's a man or a woman or a non-binary person. So these are the things that you can use to play on to avoid gendering people. Now, if you want to avoid gendering yourself, it's a bit trickier, but you do have some answers in this image here that we have in the second part. So these images, they're taken from a website that's called Genre, genre with a question mark here, exclamation mark. You have the link in the worksheet. And this entire page is dedicated to non-binary genders in French and their pronouns, or how you can express French without gendering yourself. Oh, please, because I haven't interacted with the chat so much yet, but let me know if it makes sense so far and if what I'm saying actually is understandable, because I see there was like a chat going on. Angel is going to be either proud of you and not so proud of you with a small exchange. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't read all that, but yeah, tell me if that makes sense, and I would read that later. So the thing is, a lot of people, non-binary people can. Okay, Connie's saying it makes sense. Okay, good. I'm happy that it makes sense to you, and that I'm making some clear sense. A lot of people in French are non-binary. So the thing is, the fact that you have two genders in French does not affect the gender of human people who live in France or who are French speakers. We have non-binary French speakers as well. Now, for me, I only discovered that it was a possibility when I was 29, which is bad because I am non-binary myself, but if I wasn't told, I couldn't possibly know. So it is true that it is very removed from our reality, but I believe this is true as well in English-speaking context, and it does not have anything to really do with the language or the grammar, other than the fact that some countries are just have more of a discourse regarding trans identity and non-binary identities. Like there is a lot more conversation about that happening in the English-speaking countries like the US and Canada than there is in France. So this is a fact. But in France, you still have non-binary people. They're a small and not very acknowledged minority. Small. Again, we don't really know. We don't have accurate statistics about how many people are non-binary. But they are not very visible. That's what I would say. Okay, oh, Tony is here. Hi, Tony. Nice to have you. Yeah, but nonetheless, they still have made a website where they explains how you can make those pronouns neutral pronouns and how you can go about not gendering yourself. So that's the pronoun il. So you can see this one right here. It is the most widespread. It is actually the only pronoun that I have seen someone use. All the others I've heard about them, but I haven't actually seen someone claim those pronouns. But they do exist. So there's ol or yol and ul. So ul is probably the most horrible for English speakers because ul, it's really hard to make the sound. And then there's il with E-double-L-E, which is a mixture of il and l, but you cannot orally discern it from il as like the masculine. So il is probably the most widespread. Some people don't like that it's a mix of il and l, so you can use something else. They can try to use something else. Again, it's really difficult to get other people to use those pronouns, given that they de facto don't exist. They are not in the French dictionary, for example. And it gets worse because also, like for example, my pronouns are he, him. You say that in English, like he, him, or she, her, or they, them, or he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, their. And so you also need to have in French an object pronoun. So those are the ones that are represented here. So you can use le, a, lo, and then soi or lui, which I assume are the tonic pronouns. Even speaking of pure grammar, to be honest, this website hasn't been very thorough and exact about the French grammar. I'd say it doesn't really matter. We still get it, but it goes to show that the whole thing is still a work in progress. Like 2 or 3 years ago, when I first looked into that, I was like, okay, cool that you have subject pronouns, but we need the rest. And I wasn't able to actually find anyone who had made a complete set. Well, now we have this website where there is a set, like there's a bit of like something we can use at least. And something I hadn't even thought myself until recently is that you actually need a possessive pronoun which is not masculine or feminine, and they suggest mon or mo, so like il est mon camarade. Now, for you, it might be very difficult to make a sound, like to think that mon sounds different from mon and ma and pronounce it correctly, given that like the nasals are already so hard for English speakers. But yeah, that's what they've come up with. So if you want to use pronouns that are neutral in French, you can go ahead and learn those pronouns, and then you will know more about non-binary genders than 99% of French speakers in the world. And I really mean that. The risk with that is also that people will think that you are making a mistake, like, because being a foreigner puts you in a situation where you probably will be assumed to be wrong rather than being assumed that you know something that the other native speakers that you're talking to don't know. So that's a risk. But you will know that it's a real thing, or at least that there are people on the internet who claim that it is a real thing and that there is a movement and a creation around this. And you have some examples of like accord with adjectives, because like I was saying with une personne intelligente and un individu intelligent, it's not just the noun, it's also to make the adjectives not masculine or feminine, but neutral. So yeah, we have a couple of French questions here. So Linda is saying there was just a discussion of neutral pronouns on our French yesterday on Reddit. Someone had asked how to refer to someone who was a non-binary significant other, serious commitment but not married. I would say partenaire, most likely. But that's the case. Where like I would have to say mon partenaire or ma partenaire, and I would immediately out my partner as either masculine or feminine because of the mon or ma. So that's where like this one here would come in handy. So I could say mo or mon partenaire, I guess. But I mean, I can easily imagine that what will happen next is that the person will ask me to clarify the gender. I honestly, it's a trick question. I don't know. I would probably refer to them by their name. If they have a gender neutral name, I'll just say their name, and yeah, like I have no idea. C'est ma personne. Like if I say c'est ma personne, that's typically in formulation épicène. Actually, let me type that in. That would mean because you know you can use say and it's neutral, right? So that would mean they're my person. Probably the best thing I can do. Of course, we don't know what much of a commitment there is. Honestly, the best I can do. Connie is asking the French don't have a word they or they are. Nope, we don't have that. So it's il masculine plural and elle feminine plural. And if there is a group of both, we will use il. Or il et elle, which would be écriture inclusive, which we'll get into. That is what they end up with, referring to the same question asked to someone with the same kind of expertise. I guess you get the same answer. It's pretty sad, but I don't have a better idea. And then so here they have like interesting ideas about just making the adjectives agree and adjectives and verbs agree. So il est allé, all est amoureux. So aller point A, okay, or dot A. All est amoureux X and then dot SE, which you can see that here. So this looks like actually écriture inclusive. It's very difficult to oralize. And again, if you're a foreigner and you're learning, people will more likely assume that you don't know French than assume that you are actually correct in wanting to use this because they won't know that it's what you're trying to use and maybe they won't know about that. Even worse, Ul est fatigué with ET at the end. Now this just, I mean, to me, it looks point blank like a mistake. Like, I get that I only believe it's on purpose because I got it on that website. Like for me, if someone writes that in homework, like I will correct it. There's like this is not French, just not. Il with double E est amoureux without an X. I fail to understand how removing the X would make the adjective neutral because amoureux does not sound like amoureuse, it sounds different. And it just looks like you've made a mistake. And does not help in speaking, and in writing it just looks like, yeah, you don't know how to spell. So honestly, like those, yeah. And the last one, personally my favorite, I think it's what I would maybe do about myself if I really wanted to gender myself non-binary, is to alternate between masculine and feminine. To me, that actually sounds correct, to alternate if you're a gender fluid person, for example. Other half, is there a French equivalent meaning supposed? Yeah, actually you could do that. You can say ma moitié, and that would be gender neutral. So yeah, good one. Say ma moitié. Yeah, totally can say that. Great idea. And then they have this other picture, which I also put on the worksheet, which is about doing it orally. Obviously, because like we were saying, the first version doesn't really solve the solution of being neutral orally. And when you're thinking of like people using the right pronouns, for example, you think of them speaking, not writing. I mean, you could be misgendered in writing, of course, but it's mostly a speaking situation. Like microaggressions are more likely to be spoken than written, for example. So It's really interesting that they have used a lot of things that are already in existence. So basically, the formulation épicène, the things that I shared in the first part of this class, is also things that they refer to. So, for example, for the adjectives, if you use the adjectives that ends with a, they will sound the same in masculine and feminine. For example, aimer. And the same is true for the so-called adjective épicène. So the adjectives in a, they would be spelled differently in masculine and feminine, but they will sound the same. And then there's the adjective épicène, which will sound the same and be spelled the same. That's the definition of it. So magnifique, agréable. And then you can do what they call a périphrase, which means they're just basically using more words to say the same thing. So as opposed to saying je suis content or je suis contente, which would be gendered, you can say je suis de bonne humeur or ça me réjouit. And those are turns of phrase that you can still use in order to avoid gendering yourself. It's something I sometimes do myself if I'm in a situation where it feels icky sometimes to gender myself. I will use those kind of turn of phrases that allow me to not gender myself. I have to be honest here and to say that it's very relieving for me that I speak English most of the time and I don't speak so much French, because in French it's just, yeah, it's tricky. Like it takes a lot of bandwidth to even be able to turn your phrases to never gender yourself. It's very tricky. I typically just gender myself male. It's honestly simpler. Then you can say things like je suis quelqu'un de très patient. So now we are back on these ideas that we have here. If you use quelqu'un, so I am someone very patient, that does not make you a man or a woman, right? Same in French. So je suis quelqu'un de très patient. And if it's another person, you can say c'est une personne adorable, or je suis une personne adorable. To speak about someone in the neutral, so instead of saying un ami or une amie, which would be gendered, you can say again quelqu'un qui or on m'a raconté que, so you can turn the phrase differently. You can say une connaissance, which is an acquaintance, so that's also not gendered. General terms that won't be gendered, like un membre de l'association, for example, like a member, that would be ungendered. But like all of these are basically things that happen kind of randomly, I guess. It just, some terms happen to be neutral, and then you can leverage those terms to speak in a neutral fashion. That really requires that you have a very good command of, well, either a very good command of French if you're a native, or if you're not a native, it requires that you have specifically targeted this. So for example, on your roadmap, which you know you're supposed to have, right? You're supposed to use something like this to target your French skills that you need to learn. So like if you don't have that yet, please download your French Fluency Starter Kit. And if you do have it, and if it's important for you to know how to speak in gender neutral fashion in French, I would just put a line here, learn to speak in gender neutral French. And then you focus on learning those adjectives, which are so-called épicènes, which are not differently written or which don't sound different, so that you can master those formulations. You're honestly better off with learning like the things that I shared in the first part, like the so-called formulation épicène, than trying to learn either the écriture inclusive we'll speak about, or some variations like the neopronouns or the weird way of changing the adjectives, which honestly, it looks like a mistake to me as a teacher, and it will look like you're making a mistake, especially if you're a foreigner, because people are more likely to assume you're wrong than assume that you're trying to use something modern. So yeah, if it's important to you, that has to be in there, and you just have to learn it specifically. Or like each time you learn a new adjective, you can learn if this is something that you can use for masculine and feminine. When you learn an adjective, you have to learn the masculine and feminine form in any way, by the way. So like, for example, we've spoken like at length about this thing, also part of the starter kit, which is the vocabulary magic. And the first thing that happens, second thing actually that happens on the adjectives is, learning masculine and feminine. So you have to do that anyway. So it doesn't cost you much to like, on your notebook, write, I don't know, a little star or something, and have this symbol say, okay, this is neutral. This is quote unquote épicène, and you can use it for men and women and non-binary people alike. So that's really what I would do. And then there's, the so-called neologism. So again, new words. Si vous êtes out, that's what they say. So if you're out as a non-binary person, then you can make up shit, basically. You can say, instead of beau or belle, you can say biel, because why not? Instead of heureux, heureuse, you can say heureux. if you're out in your life and you're willing, I mean, honestly, I say you, but it's probably going to apply more to natives. If you're willing to like go through this fight every day, you can make up new words. Why not? I actually have tried in the past to make up a set of gender neutral pronouns because there were some people I wanted to speak about without gendering them. The situation was that I could not speak without having someone ask why the hell I put a weird pronoun in the middle of my sentence every time I made a sentence. And that was really difficult. So it's something that if you're really an activist, you can do it, but it's going to take a lot of mental bandwidth to even just express yourself, not because the language is hard, but because other people are going to question you and challenge you. And of course, if you're not a native, it's going to be worse. So sorry that I don't come with great news, but I guess the good news really is the so-called formulation epicenters. They have always been here. They are correct, and you can still use them. And if you know how to use them well, you can get away with them pretty well. And as we will see in the next part, it's actually pretty much better than the so-called écriture inclusive. So does this make sense so far? Do you have any questions? If you do, please ask them now before we get into the annoying part. I mean, if you thought it was annoying so far, I'm sorry. But yeah, the annoying part is coming up. Because the third part of this thing is so the so-called écriture inclusive. So that will translate as inclusive spelling. I've mostly put links here and a little example in this image. And this image actually was the article that I got it from. You have the link here. Is really, really interesting because it's from a journalist that was trying, and a male journalist actually, who was trying to write press articles with being inclusive and being aware of giving visibility to women without making his writing heavier or harder to read. And it was absolutely fascinating to find the ways that he would find those solutions and just how he would, quote unquote, negotiate with female colleagues to just understand what their feelings and this kind of things. Other than that, I've linked a 28 pages manual d'écriture inclusive. So user manual, 28 pages, that should tell you how cumbersome and clunky the thing is if you need a user manual that's 28 pages to be able to understand it as a freaking native. Like, because this is not meant for non-native, it's meant for the French who want to understand what that is about. And then there's also a link that I've connected, which is a good resource to make it more efficient. I believe that's probably the same as this one. So you can see here that these are two examples of écriture inclusive. And the first one is good, and the second one is just not efficient. But unfortunately, a lot of people do use this kind of version. A lot. More actually activists, to be honest, like not regular people. But so a bad way of doing it would be à toutes ceux, celles qui sont intéressés par l'écriture inclusive. And a good way of doing it would be à toutes celles et ceux qui sont intéressés par l'écriture inclusive. That's from that journalist who was really considering the French language and looking at, okay, how do we do it? Because écriture inclusive is something that came out, I think it's a recommendation from the government. It came out a few years ago. I haven't found the exact date, no matter how much I looked for it. And the idea is that because masculine takes precedence over the feminine in the French language, and actually I just discovered that it was not always like that, and it only started to be a thing in the 19th century, which is really interesting because it coincides with that time when we also had colonization, and we had this white supremacist idea that the white quote-unquote race is quote-unquote superior because the males and the females are biologically and socially clearly separate. And it blows your mind when you learn that this was the argument for colonization and for oppressing the people from other ethnicities and other cultures, that we just made the case that us white people are superior because we have very clearly distinct men and women. Of course, it's all bullshit because it's neither true that we are superior, nor is it true that we have distinct men and women, and I am the living proof of that. And when I read through it, I'm like, oh, is that like, how could people possibly come up with this kind of crap and be able to enforce it for decades or almost centuries at this point? And some people, many people actually still believe that. it makes me physically sick to think about it. That like the reason why I have been facing so much oppression in my life as a not clearly male or female person is because of a bunch of colonialists in the 19th century coming up with this reason to oppress yet other people. And I was like, what? Why can't you just live and let live? Like, come on. So no, anyway, this happens, this is history, and we have to deal with it now. And so the French government, especially there's a committee that's responsible for gender inclusivity or whatever, which was also very controversial because at some point they hired a bunch of scientists to, you know, sociologists and so on. And all those scientists were male. And it was, yeah, actually a bunch of members of that committee just resigned because they were like, no, it's not possible that in a committee where we want to hire experts on the rights and visibility of women, that all those experts that we hire, all 6 of them are men. It's not like they can't have that and sit there and then, this is normal, this is fine. So yeah, that's where they're at. And they created this concept of just really, you know, like doing things like this. Toute, celle, ce, and then they have this 28 manual on how you can use it. It's bad. I can't explain you how to do it. It's just like find a way to like mash up that. Honestly, like don't try to do it. Just don't. It's cumbersome, clunky, useless, and it will make your head burst because if you're already trying to manage the French language, it's pretty hard. Yeah. Tony is saying surely à tout le monde sounds better. Oh, you did you remove those messages that disappeared? But yeah, indeed, tout le monde sounds better, or tout. Yeah, there are ways of making it better. The first one, à toutes celles et ceux qui sont intéressés. But as you can see here, the intéressé is still in the masculine plural. This author was making the case that the point is not to make every word look gender neutral, but to give more visibility to women, that there is no reason to say tous ceux if some women are also included, and that you can say celles et ceux because it's nicer. It sounds more like French. So I really recommend this article. It's pretty good. One thing that struck me, which I printed as well, and those are 2 pages of the so-called Manuel d'écriture inclusive, and it's page, I believe, 24 and 25. And this is a poll that was made in France about the efficiency of écriture inclusive. And when I found that, I was like, oh my God, it's even worse than what I thought. So you can look it up. I mean, it's a bit difficult to show it. Basically, everything that's blue are the people who, so you ask a question to the French. Everything that's blue are the people who quote only men. Things that are green are people who quote 1 man and 1 woman, and yellow are people who quote 2 women. And the question is always quote 2 people, blah, blah, blah. So for example, the first question was about TV moderators. And in the first version, they used a masculine only form. So citer 2 présentateurs du journal télévisé, okay? So basically quote 2 speakers, two television moderators. And with this masculine form, you can see that 46% quoted only men, 35% quoted women, 1 man, 1 woman, and 6 quoted 1 man and 1 woman. Then they had the formulation inclusive, citer 2 présentateurs ou présentatrices du journal télévisé, okay, so like closer to the écriture inclusive. And as you can see with this, you still have 46% people who quoted 2 men, 29% quoted 1 man and 1 woman, and 13% quoted 2 women. So it is indeed increased, okay? So if you don't use just the masculine, you use the écriture inclusive, yes, it increases because it gives more visibility to women and people we are going to quote women more likely. But if we were to use the formulation épicène that we spoke in the beginning, so quote 2 people, right, 2 persons who have moderate the TV, the news program, then look at that. Only 36% of people quote 2 men, 32% quote 1 of each, and 90% quote 2 women. So that means that if you are to use the formulation that existed before they came up with the écriture inclusive, it will give better results than the new version. So why the hell do you have to come up with something new that works less well than what you had before? And if you look through the other examples, I'm not going to read them all to you, but they're pretty much, similar. So this one works a bit better with the écriture inclusive, but this one does not. It's écrivain et écrivaine, and Olympic champions. But yeah, it's insane. Like when I saw that, I was like, whoa, this is bad. This is bad because what we get from having a body of the government come up with those creations of so-called écriture inclusive with the goal of making women more visible, it's extremely counterproductive, as we see from this poll. And also it creates a lot of quote-unquote controversy. There are a lot of people who feel that it destroys the language, or that it's something that like the feminists are taking over the world or whatever, which we're very far, very, very far from having a world where like women take over or whatever. It's not happening at all. But you do have a lot of people who have very violent reaction because they don't like the idea. And the thing is, it was all unnecessary. We had what we needed already. We could just have had recommendations to use those so-called formulation épicène more, as opposed to this mess that, the mess that you can see here. Also, the journalist was really there was a part of this article which is about computer, so because the computers have not been programmed to do that, so it is very difficult. That is why you can see like there's a lot of little red wiggle on this one. It's because the computers are not meant to do that. And if I try to write in this way, sometimes I do it in class because it makes sense to write it this way for my student. The computer doesn't like it. It's just I'm gonna get red wiggles or and I'm fine. I mean, sometimes, especially with Google, I will teach some words that are infrequent, and Google will be like, I don't know about this, but I know, and it's fine. But still, it's a pain, especially if you're a journalist. So yeah, do you have any questions? That's my little rant about gender neutral and inclusive stuff. I believe I've covered everything on this page except for the idiom of the week, which you're probably waiting for. So yeah, if you have any question or any comment or something you'd like to try, you'd like to share, sorry, just write it down. And I'm going to speak about the idiom of the week. So the idiom of the week is je ne la connais ni d'Ève ni d'Adam. So ni d'Ève ni d'Adam, and I wrote it like inclusive, right? Le, la, or le a, as we can see here. We have this le a option nowadays. I wouldn't recommend you use it, but I put it here because it was the topic. But yeah, the idiom is ni d'Ève ni d'Adam, and it means not at all. So I don't know this person at all. Ni d'Ève ni d'Adam. So neither from Eve, neither from Adam. So Eve and Adam being these biblical figures. Fun fact, I was today at a interesting event where we had to walk around Vienna. Well, actually, we drove around Vienna, but we have to just basically go around Vienna to find different things. And they call it a French rally. Because it was in French, and I did that with other French people. And actually, one guy out of the blue just used this expression. I was like, oh, interesting. That's my idiom of the week. So people actually use this idiom. I can confirm that. It was used today. That does not happen to me often because I rarely spend the entire day with French speakers. But yeah, that's the idiom. So if you want to say in French that you don't know this person at all, you can say je la connais ni d'Ève ni d'Adam, the person or a group of person. Right. So any question? Else, brace yourself for the French summary. I'll try to explain that in French. I hope I'm going to be able to do that in French without getting really annoyed. Ok, donc aujourd'hui on parle des possibilités de s'exprimer en français de manière neutre, c'est-à-dire sans utiliser le masculin ou le féminin, ou au moins sans attribuer un genre aux personnes dont on parle, c'est-à-dire être inclusif des personnes non binaires. et ne pas genrer les personnes quand c'est pas nécessaire. Et on parlera aussi un petit peu des néopronoms et des néo-adjectifs, des néo-accords et de l'écriture inclusive, qui est quelque chose qui m'énerve beaucoup, mais je peux vous en parler un petit peu. Donc tout d'abord, la première chose qui est importante à comprendre, c'est les formulations épicènes. Les formulations épicènes sont les formulations qui ne sont pas ni masculines ni féminines ou qui sont les deux. Et une chose qui est très importante à comprendre avant même de comprendre ça, c'est que le genre grammatical n'est pas attaché à un objet. C'est-à-dire que quand on dit que la bouteille est féminine, c'est une manière de parler. C'est pas la bouteille qui est féminine. Ça n'a pas de genre en soi. C'est le mot bouteille, ok? La bouteille. Et c'est un mot féminin. Ou si je vous dis l'hérisson, un hérisson, c'est un mot masculin. Mais ça ne veut pas dire que cet individu ici est masculin ou féminin. D'ailleurs, si c'était un hérisson femelle, on dirait un hérisson femelle ou un hérisson mâle. Mais le mot hérisson resterait masculin. Donc ça, c'est quelque chose qui est très important de comprendre parce que ça nous permet donc d'utiliser des mots qui ont un genre, mais qu'on peut attacher à une personne qui n'a pas forcément le même genre que le mot. Comme par exemple une personne. Une personne, c'est toujours féminin. On peut dire je connais une personne très intelligente, mais la personne en question, ça peut être un homme ou une femme ou une personne non binaire, et ça ne changera pas. C'est juste que la personne, le mot personne sera toujours féminin. Et donc, on peut l'utiliser sans partager le genre de la personne en question. Pareil avec un individu, parce qu'un individu, ce sera toujours masculin. Donc, on peut dire je connais un individu très intelligent. Enfin, on a quelqu'un qui est masculin par défaut. Donc, on peut dire je connais quelqu'un d'intelligent. C'est plutôt neutre, mais bon, neutre masculin, c'est la même chose en français. On a aussi des adjectifs qui ont la même forme entre le masculin et le féminin, donc c'est ce qu'on appelle des adjectifs épicènes. Par exemple, on a vu qu'il y a agréable ou qu'est-ce qu'on a comme adjectif? Magnifique, par exemple. En général, c'est des adjectifs qui finissent par E. Ces adjectifs-là sont similaires au féminin et au masculin, et donc c'est ça qui nous permet de ne pas se genrer soi-même. Donc, et on peut utiliser des formulations comme je suis quelqu'un de très patient ou c'est une personne adorable. Et ça permet de parler de manière neutre tout en respectant la grammaire. Et l'avantage, c'est qu'il n'y a personne qui peut vous critiquer pour faire ça, pour avoir fait ça. Donc ça, c'est très utile. Parce que tout le reste des choses dont on parle aujourd'hui, c'est des choses que les gens, malheureusement, vont beaucoup critiquer, voire même il y a des choses qui ressemblent carrément à des erreurs de grammaire. C'est le cas, par exemple, des exemples qui sont partagés sur ces images. Donc, tout d'abord, il y a les pronoms neutres, les néo-pronoms neutres. Donc, en français, on n'a pas à l'origine de pronoms neutres, comme en anglais, on a they. En français, il n'y a pas ça. Donc, tous les pronoms neutres sont nouveaux. Le seul pronom neutre que j'ai vu quelqu'un utiliser, c'est il, donc c'est iel. Et il y a aussi d'autres orthographes. Et là, donc, sur ce site qui s'appelle genre, point d'exclamation, et il nous rapporte qu'il existe aussi all, ul, c'est très dur à prononcer pour les anglophones, et il with i, deux L. Ça, c'est les pronoms sujets. Il existe aussi, bien sûr, des pronoms objets parce qu'on doit avoir toute la déclinaison. En anglais, on a he, him, right? Or he, him, his, rather. She, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. En français, pour correspondre au him, her ou them, on a le a, l'o, et pour les pronoms toniques, on a soi et lui. Moi, je trouve ça très bizarre d'utiliser soi pour une personne identifiée parce que soi, c'est normalement un réflexif. C'est vraiment très bizarre. Je ferai pas ça. Et enfin, il y a les pronoms possessifs. Et on aurait ma et mon. Et ce site suggère d'utiliser man et mo pour rendre les choses neutres. Donc, par exemple, il et man, camarade. Franchement, ça, c'est quelque chose. La distinction est subtile à l'oral. Si vous êtes un non-natif et que vous apprenez le français et que surtout si vous êtes un anglophone, ça va être très difficile pour vous de prononcer ça clairement, d'autant plus que la plupart des Français n'en ont jamais entendu parler. Ça, c'est vraiment le risque, et c'est qu'on pense que vous ne savez pas parler. Et je pense qu'il y a plus de chances que les Français pensent que vous ne savez pas parler que qu'ils pensent que vous savez des choses que eux ne savent pas. Malheureusement, c'est souvent la situation quand on n'est pas un natif. Par exemple, je me souviens qu'un jour j'ai dit à Linda, j'ai fait une blague en disant oh this dating advice does not make you win, it just makes you a player. Et elle a supposé que je savais pas que player voulait dire deux choses différentes. Et ça, c'est typiquement le, le maléfice d'être un non-natif. Je sais très bien que player peut vouloir dire deux choses différentes, et c'était donc un jeu de mots. Mais voilà, donc c'est le genre de choses qui va vous arriver si vous essayez d'utiliser ce genre de choses, parce que les Français vont probablement penser que vous savez pas vraiment ça. Encore pire, les adjectifs. Donc, bon, il y a la concaténation des deux formes, c'est comme ça que ça s'appelle. Donc, on peut utiliser aller.e, amoureux, ex.se. Ça, c'est très difficile à verbaliser. Ils ont proposé fatigué au lieu de fatigué et e, fatigué avec et. Franchement, pour moi, ça ressemble à une erreur d'orthographe, très clairement. IL est amoureux, amoureux sans X, pareil, ça ressemble pour moi à une grosse erreur d'orthographe. Naturellement, si un élève écrivait ça sur ses devoirs, j'aurais tendance à noter que c'est faux. Maintenant que je sais que ça existe, je pense que je mettrai une note en disant voilà, l'association genre a dit que c'était possible de faire ça, mais c'est pas du français officiel, il faut s'en rendre compte. Et enfin, on peut utiliser le masculin et le féminin de manière alternée. À mon avis, surtout en tant que personne gender fluid, c'est ce qui est le plus correct, probablement. Ce site aussi nous propose des manières de parler au neutre à l'oral. Donc, c'est des choses comme utiliser bien sûr les adjectifs et les formulations épicènes. Je connais quelqu'un qui, on m'a raconté que, une connaissance, un membre de l'assaut, tout ça, c'est des choses qu'on a vues avant. On peut continuer d'utiliser ça. Donc, le site recommande vraiment les mêmes choses que j'ai recommandées au début et aussi quelques néologismes. Franchement, les néologismes, je vous les déconseille pour la même raison dont on a déjà parlé. Et enfin, la dernière partie de ce cours, c'était sur l'écriture inclusive. Alors, l'écriture inclusive, j'ai fait beaucoup de recherches pour essayer de bien comprendre, mais plus je comprenais, plus je me rendais compte que c'était inutile et même nocif. Comme on l'a vu dans ce petit sondage, eh bien, l'écriture inclusive, c'est non seulement très désagréable à utiliser, c'est pas pratique, c'est difficile, mais en plus, ça marche moins bien que les tournures épicènes. Donc, on pouvait, dès le début, en fait, utiliser les choses qu'on avait déjà. On n'avait pas besoin de créer ça. Et oui, ça m'a vraiment fatigué. Je trouve ça extrêmement désagréable parce que l'écriture inclusive est vraiment très controversée. Il y a beaucoup de gens qui la critiquent et je pense qu'on a créé plus de mal que de bien en créant ça, vraiment. Enfin, il y avait l'expression de la semaine qui est ni d'Ève ni d'Adam. Donc, connaître quelqu'un ni d'Ève ni d'Adam, ça veut dire ne pas connaître cette personne du tout. Donc voilà, c'était le résumé en français. This was the French summary. I think I don't know how clear I was in it. It's a topic that's unclear to start with, so there's that. I hope you have learned something today and that the formulation épicène are at least something that you can use. If you work closer with me, like for example, one-on-one, or if you are in the French Fluency Accelerator, it's something we can talk about more in details if you'd like. So if you'd like to, for example, try to write a text that's completely ungendered as a part of your homework, you can do that and I'll be happy to correct it and give you feedback on that. And yeah, please let me know if you have any questions, if this was useful. You can ask any questions that you want about like any topic that's related to French or any question that I can actually answer. And yeah, I'm glad I did manage to make this class. It was not one of the classes with the most attendance, as you can probably see by the number of people online. But it exists, and hopefully it can be found in the future by people who will find it interesting, even though, to be honest, gender-neutral French and being a non-binary person in France or a non-binary French speaker, it's a mess. I know that myself, but hey, that's what we have to deal with because it's the situation, unfortunately. Tony is saying it's more useful to understand and be aware of. Yes, I think it's important to understand that, yeah, the French language is exclusive by definition. Oh, also something I didn't tell you about, which pissed me off so bad about the écriture inclusive, is that the whole point of the écriture inclusive is to enhance the visibility of women. It is based on a binary vision of French gender. The people who have created it have not gone farther than thinking, okay, there are men and women, and the French language is making women less visible, and we have to force the visibility of women and force people to make women more visible. And it's not fundamentally a bad thing, but every time you do that, every time you decide to give more privilege to a particular portion of the society, in this case women, it means that you push farther into the dark the other people that are already more marginalized. So in this case, non-binary people. So I really appreciate the work of the website Genre, which, I mean, I'm criticizing them a lot because a lot of it looks like spelling mistakes. But I do appreciate their work a lot because what they have done is seek to find ways to make non-binary people have a place in grammar. And that I believe is a great activism and great something that can be praised and should be praised, even if some of their ideas are a bit, I would say, unfortunate based on just how removed they are from the grammar as it is practiced. But they at least try to do something that is also inclusive of non-binary people. And they also rely a lot on the formulation épicène, which honestly, if you're an educated French person, it's what you should be doing, because it's the only thing that you can really do that you can't be attacked for, because it's correct French and no one can deny it. And I mean, it's not that you can't be attacked for it. People will attack you for anything. But you will be a lot less attacked if what you are saying is clearly correct in French than if what you're saying is bending the grammar backwards to try and fit it into some ideas of what you want to say. So yeah, that's what I had for you today. We that was 1 minutes of rambling. So yep, I'm gonna sign off if you don't have any more questions. And yeah, I actually don't have a topic for next week, but I can do French and German. That was requested, so probably what I'm gonna do. But if you have something right now that you'd like to submit, or if you have an idea later, yeah, please send it to me. I'll or else I'll sit with Linda and brainstorm what we can do next time. All right, so thank you guys for sitting through this with me. It was amazing to see you all again, and yeah, I'll see you next week. Bye.